Hello again. Welcome to the fourth drawings video. Well, in a way, the last one was really only half of a video, so it's a lot shorter. This will hopefully be the last one. This is going to be longer than the previous two, because I have discovered that this camera actually will record for longer than 29 minutes. The reason it told me otherwise is because it just sort of blanks out at 29 minutes. It's like as far as it will go. It'll keep recording, but it'll say there's 0 seconds left, and once I stop recording, it'll go back to 20 minutes. It's a programming glitch or something. So, enough of that. Need a couple minutes to get everything out here. This is going to be the last drawings video, most likely. I might need one more, but probably not. And to start, I have another box index cards, but I also have this, and I also have another book. But these are mini index cards. These are, instead of 3x5, they're 3x2.5 inches. I like them just for doing little thumbnail drawings. And a lot of these I'm not very proud of, but they did help to figure out future ideas. So this one, first one, is a Scourge Heavy Bomber. This is used by Lice. This is about, if you can't read it, it says 49 meters, so 49 meters, almost 50 meters. It's about 150, more than 150 feet in wingspan. So a fairly large cockpit up here. There's four engines. There's four, if you look at this from the side, these fins would stick up a bit. It's basically a flying wing bomber, and its job is to deliver very powerful ordnance. This is the kind of thing that would carry a nuclear weapon, or if it was fielded against a ship, it would carry very large, or very powerful anti-ship torpedoes, air torpedoes, I mean, you know. Similar things. Sometimes they've adapted, the Lice have adapted this bomber to carry paratroopers instead of bombs, ordnance. So that's that. This is a picture of a Hulk. I only inked this in very recently. I've had this drawing for about 8 months now. I only inked it last week, finally. So I get very, very careful about my inking, especially on a successful, in my mind, successful drawing. And the reason for that is, obviously, I don't want to screw up. It's not that big a deal. I can edit it off on the computer, but who knows? You know, who knows how good it will look on the paper afterwards. This is a breaker. I already talked about Hulk, so talk about the breaker some more. And as you can see, they fight with a ballistic shield, and they carry what's called a breaker rifle, and it usually carries a fairly high caliber round, about 20 rounds, usually either an automatic rifle of some kind or an automatic just gun. It's pretty close quarters, but very powerful round, very thick and heavy, meant for close quarters combat, or it will carry shotgun shells with buckshot, so a bit of a spread from that. It's also got a blade on the bottom for, hand-to-hand combat. It's got a bandolier with more shells or bullets, armor padding on the legs, helmet. Now, one thing about the Hulk helmet is that, and it's not as well drawn in this one, is a very low angle of incidence. So a bullet that hits it's likely to skip up and off, rather than hit head-on and punch a hole. The breaker helmet is similar in some ways to this, but not quite as much, at least not in this drawing. And you can't see it very well in this one, because I didn't really draw it in very well, but in the other breaker drawings, you can see that they carry explosives packed to their chest. In a way, this is kind of This might be an explosiveless breaker. I mean, not all of the breakers are fielded with explosives on their bodies, but the idea that there's a dead man trigger, and once this creature is dead, the explosives will detonate, and usually kill anyone within about 10 meters or so of the explosion. It's not an extremely powerful explosion, but it's about equivalent to a hand grenade of some kind. Here's another picture of a Hulk. This is a rocket Hulk. These rockets will probably not incapacitate a tank, but they'll certainly do some damage to it, and it's got, between 4 and 12 of them in its little arm launcher. And usually these go into battle either against emplaced positions or against armor. There's some that are useful against aircraft, but they're not as common because it's usually a bit pointless to have one of these creatures big on the ground exposed to enemy fire that's only there to take out aircraft. Usually the Lice will field an anti-aircraft vehicle or shoulder-launched missiles instead. This creature is mostly used against armor, vehicles, emplacements, that sort of thing. There's also grenade launcher type versions. I mean, they'll field these creatures with all sorts of things. They're very versatile. This is a comparison in size between a Hulk, which is about 12 feet tall, a Breaker, which is about 2.5 feet, or 8.5 feet tall, and a Who Soldier, which are 5 to 6 feet tall. So, as you can see, there's a pretty big difference in size. Hang on a second. Okay, sorry about that. This is a picture of a Laus Skytrain tower. There's two VAR Who fighters in the foreground approaching it. There's also a battle cruiser approaching it a little further away and a little lower. And these over here are also battle cruisers. And one of these is about between quite a few kilometers tall. These are very, very tall towers, and these would be the hanging train lines. You got one going one way, one going the other, and they're very, very fast. And due to the sort of congruent or repetitive nature, the lines are able to move very, very quickly and smoothly through these tubes. A kind of maglev train system. But these are very tempting targets for the Who's to attack, because while each tower is fairly well defended, just destroying one of these towers is enough to take out a significant portion of a Laus supply line. This is, I just remembered, I'm not doing that yet. Or this. You'll get to see these later. This is a picture of a Daleska victim. You can see what they look like. And you can see these pustules have completely taken over this unfortunate person's head. And they are mostly blind from it. And they pretty much just wander around, try to attack or eat most living things that they see. Here's an interesting one. This is a hull crawler. This is another, none of these pictures I'm showing you, almost none of them were inked before. I inked them all very recently, actually. The drawings were in pencil before. And the reason I like to ink, and I'm actually going to show a little bit of what I used to draw in a minute. And this was originally a pencil drawing, and when I scanned it in, it was alright, I could color it, but the black ink gives a lot better of contrast, and so I like to use that. So this creature is a hull crawler. It's a bioform that the Lice created to drill through the hulls of ships. What they'll do is they'll open canisters of these while flying over a ship, and these creatures will land rather curled up on the hull. they will grab on. They have magnetic things attached to their feet. And they've also got very sharp claws, very strong grip to help them grab onto anything that's not metal. And this surgically implanted drill allows them to cut through metal fairly quickly. It's usually heated. And once these creatures are inside, they can spray acid, or they can just try to attack with the drills. And the idea is that they will hack at machinery, they will get inside, and they'll attack people. They're not very dangerous. These creatures are about a foot tall, maybe a little less. And lice usually will drop a few hundred of them. And a lot of them will just get blown away in the wind, or will fall and bounce off. But those who make it can wreak a lot of havoc. And again, a lot of these bioforms, except for the Hulks and the Breakers, and maybe the Adalax, but other than that, or perhaps the Skitterstings too, those four are by far the most commonly fielded. I mean, these will be used, but selectively. It's not like Laos battle cruisers are going to be always trying to fly overhead and drop these. A lot of them will keep a few canisters in reserve. They're also used just for general sabotage. They'll drop them over a base or something to wreak havoc there. But again, all these exotic bioforms I'm showing, they're not particularly common, except for the Hulks, Breakers, Skitterstings, Adalax. Those are pretty common. This is a ACM landing shuttle. This is what the Who's use when they want something faster than a tricopter. And I will show a tricopter picture later. I've got some drawing notebooks to go through. This is the ACM landing shuttle. It's pretty quick. It's about 3 times as fast max speed as a tricopter because it's using jet engines rather than a propeller or a turbo propeller. I'm not using that word as it's properly supposed to be used. It's a similar thing though. Another gun, more guns. I drew quite a few guns. I had to stop drawing guns because I realized there's kind of no point after a while. This one's kind of cool, but I'll talk about later. Here's another picture of Livery, character I described in one of the previous videos. This is actually my favorite drawing that I've managed to do of Livery. This is Emily. Just sort of a regular drawing of her. This was also in pencil until I inked it in. I like to draw the characters. This is a tank. I don't know which faction it belongs to. I'm pretty sure it was meant to be a Who tank, but I can't remember now. I've drawn some tanks from both sides. This is Julia. This was Orion's romantic partner while they were fighting at Macalave. Just kind of her. When I did the drawing, I put some stars and the moon in the background and whatnot, just for, because that's what it's supposed to be. Here we go. Here's a piece of ordnance I can talk about. This is the MXH-88 Showstopper ship-to-ship missile. And the reason it is called the Showstopper is because it will pretty much put an end to a good deal of cruiser battles. Unfortunately, it has some rather adverse side effects, and it's pretty expensive. So this is basically a fairly small-sized nuclear warhead. And this will be launched against massed groups of Laos cruisers in an attempt to blow up a whole lot of them at once. There's also a similar thing to this. It's a cruiser, and I don't remember what it's called now. It's crewed by a very small number, and it's meant to be flown into Laos super fortresses. The crew are supposed to escape, and after not that long after they've escaped, it will detonate. It's full of nuclear bombs, or just a nuclear reactor. It can be set up to detonate. This is an earlier drawing of Peter. I don't know if this is the one I used. I don't think so, because it's not inked. This was one of the drawings. Peter and Emily in particular, and probably Orion and Cassiopeia, I did the most drawings of. This is Syra. After Kalana died, the attacks on Serengarth began to get more relentless. The Lice managed to attack Anahaya, which was a city on the other side of the mountain near Serengarth. And thus it was out of Serengarth's line of fire, and Serengarth, being an extremely powerful stronghold, usually could hold off Laos attacks, numbering in maybe a few hundred cruisers. Could easily hold that off just with the thousands of railguns, dozens of extremely heavy railguns, ship splitter railguns they're affectionately called. They can just split a ship clean in two with one shot. But without that massive artillery, the Lice were able to make use of their superior numbers and were eventually able to overwhelm the who was defending Anahaya, and then they were able to put in artillery that was more than capable of raining down a pretty significant barrage on Serengarth, and this put a great deal of strain on its shields. And this also allowed them to field attacks that were pretty steady, that caused Serengarth to have to focus a lot of its attention on that area. And as a result, the defense infrastructure slowly began to fall apart. And it was during this time that Orion found himself pretty hopeless. He'd wander Serengarth alone at night, going through the clubs and nightclubs and social life. If you can imagine a shopping mall, one of those kind of like multi-story shopping malls, different, not quite like that, but that sort of structure or building going all throughout a tree city, many kilometers tall. That's sort of what it's like inside a lot of parts of Serengarth. Other places have got that sort of dark underground military bunker thing to them. Some of them have got that, atrium sort of thing going for them. Hopefully I can do a little bit of 3D work at some point to show what the interior of Serengarth looks like, but being a many kilometer tall tree city with huge passages underground and very diverse areas even within it, it's kind of not a one-size-fits-all thing. But anyway, back to Syra. She was just a sort of brief, kind of casual romantic partner that Orion had during this time, and he sort of found solace in that. She wasn't a soldier like Julia had been, and she wasn't from far away like Kalana had been, but she was a very carefree kind of socialite type person, and she had a sort of carefree attitude that attracted him at that time. She ended up dying due to an attack on Serengarth. One of the artillery shots from the Lice hit Serengarth and destroyed an entire branch, pretty much. Not a large branch of the tree city, but a pretty significant size one. And her apartment was in there. And the whole chosen ability or intuition that Orion has, it's not exactly seeing into the future, but it does give a bit of warning. And there have been times when that has resulted in him realizing that his powers have either, he felt like he could have prevented something when really he couldn't have, or in one case he moved his ship out of the way of a missile, and the missile ended up locking onto another ship and blowing that up, and he felt some vague sense of responsibility and that whole thing. This is a drawing of Myron. I'm actually pretty fond of this drawing. Can't really see the stubble he's got in his chin there, but that's there. I don't know what time of his life this drawing is. He's the only original character of the story of the Who's that's still alive. And the story is about, just as much as it's about the war, it's about sort of the development of the Green family and learning, their origins and what happened to them and, why they are the way they are, and just sort of the whole growing up thing and developing as a family. Making it out to be more than it is, but the idea is he's really the only constant character throughout it, and even in the interims when Orion's children are growing up, he takes over the reign as the driving protagonist of the story for a while. And even after Leo and Andromeda begin to take part in the battles, he's still a very major factor. Another gun. This is an early drawing of Triel, who I showed you before. Not my favorite drawing of her, I've done better ones. This is Bree Alcata, the pilot that I mentioned before. On one of the last videos. This is Aldrich Noss. I also believe I talked about him. This is Jack, and he had a... hang on a second. Yeah. So Jack and Megan were two Serengarthian soldiers who escaped with a few other ships after Serengarth fell, and for a while after Serengarth fell, the story sort of split between the attention of Myron, who had fled south with his ship, and eventually run out of fuel, attacked by a couple Louth fighters, had to crash land in the cliffs, and he started the village of Neverfall there. There was Orion, who was in captivity for a while before they attempted to execute him. He escaped and started on a very long, lonely sort of sojourn by himself through the ruined world. But also Jack and Megan were there to show that the fight was still going, even in a much reduced capacity. The Whos had been pretty much reduced to guerrilla warfare during that time. Until the Underthrone arose, Serengarth was pretty much the sole remaining power that the Whos had in that region. And Jack and Megan were Serengarthian soldiers. They weren't necessarily leaders, but they were fairly high-ranking. Or they led their own group of soldiers into battle. And Orion, they eventually found Orion after he'd been wandering for quite a few months. And they took him in for a while, and eventually Orion was banished for reasons. But he had a sort of good reason to do what he did, but not really. It's one of those character conflict things where you can see why someone did something, and the scary part is, even though they did something wrong, it might have been right, in a way. Anyway, this is Yrek, as you pronounce Y-Y-R-I-C-K, apparently. Yrek was the older brother of Livry, and he led a small group of Denarn resistance fighters in the caves in the desert around the Calavex. This is Alana Greiner. She was a lieutenant on the Selfin, which was Myron's ship at the time Serengarth fell, and she and the other crew and him, Myron, destroyed a lot of the missile ships that were attacking Serengarth and gave some other ships time to escape. And she became his sort of lieutenant, as well as Aldrich, once he founded Neverfall to the south. And she went with Aldrich and Myron and Abby, who was Myron's wife, when they crossed the desert towards the super fortress near Neverfall. And she was killed during one of the Louth attacks, when the Lice attacked them while they were crossing that desert. She was also briefly a romantic companion of Aldrich. This is Thrin Meloro. She was a mechanic at a stronghold near Serengarth that I remember, but I can't remember the name of. And she was a friend of Cassiopeia's, and after Cassiopeia died, they kind of didn't see her for a while. She didn't show up in the story for a while. But when she did, Orion, it was after the Underthrone had risen and retaken Serengarth, and the Lice were attacking Serengarth yet again. And during one of these sieges, they barely managed to escape. back to Serengarth, and she had to abandon that stronghold. And she stayed until even after Orion had died for a long time, and after those 7 years of fallout, after the finality weapon was launched, when Myron and Triel and Aldrich and the others went to the west to try and find new settlement places, she stayed behind to take care of Leo, Zoe, Andromeda, and Hannah, who are Orion and Myron's sons and daughters. And when they returned, unfortunately, Serengarth had been overrun by Daleska creatures, as the infection had gotten in somehow, and had spread very virulently, killing almost everyone there. Thrin and the children were some of the few to escape, but unfortunately she was killed while they were trying to rescue the children. This is Gideon Marl. He was a soldier, underthrown soldier, who went with Orion when they flew to the west to attack the finality weapon. And he fought not alongside Orion, but he fought alongside Myron with another underthrown soldier named Anna during the final battle there. And as they went west, fleeing the tide of destruction the finality weapon was bringing, trying to stay ahead of it, they came to a seaside nation, and there the lice were attacking it, and they were trying to get people to evacuate, so Gideon and some other soldiers helped to hold off a Skittersting attack by the Nefnari while they boarded the rest of the transports, and he and the other soldiers were overrun. But they did manage to get the civilians out safely, most of them. This is Diometric. This is the corrupt prince that ruled Serengarth before Orion came, and his father was King Udbuth, and who was technically the ruler of Serengarth, but Diometric had kind of been poisoning the king to the degree that his mind was too feeble to really rule. And when the Serengarthian refugees arrived, Xenia, who was Diometric's younger sister, was very much in favor of letting these people stay, and in fact forced Diometric to let them come in. And he did, but he did not like the Serengarthians at all. He was worried, or I've been saying Serengarthians, the Macalavean, who were fleeing Macalave after they destroyed it. He was not very welcoming of them, and in fact, Orion caught him killing one of them, and later challenged Diometric to a knife duel in the throne room. Orion won, and he ended up the ruler of Serengarth, since King Udbuth ended up dead thanks to Diometric as well. So he married Xenia in a sort of a marriage of alliance type thing, and they kind of grew to love each other after the fact. He was pretty aggrieved when she died. This is a Nefnari infantryman. Looks pretty similar to the rest of the lice, except a lot of times the nozzle of the gas mask is smaller, almost like a tube coming down, rather than just like the whole bottom of the face. This is Tenebrok, Kalana's older brother. He was the leader of the village in the ruins of Fainro, the village of Calisier, and he sacrificed himself to lead off some missiles that were chasing down the ship that had rescued Orion and Kalana after their journey to the caves. This is a picture of livery-wearing captured louse goggles that give a good degree of infrared vision. A lot of the Dinarans use these goggles. This is another early drawing of Peter Green. This is an earlier drawing of Cassiopeia. Another drawing of Kelleric Knoll, the mercenary kind of guy. This is a Nefnari Featherlander, and this often carries Skitterstings. There's a small gun on the underside. There's 2 engines to direct its movement, but this up here is a very light, fluffy parachute, almost like apparatus that catches the wind, and it will be dropped from cruisers. And these engines will help it move around, and it's kind of like a glider to some degree. I mean, it can direct the engines down and go up a little, but it's usually meant to descend. And this whole assembly is about 30 feet tall, and this is probably 100, 150 feet. This is a VAR Hawk fighter. These were used near the last days of McAlevey. VAR, it was a new fighter development, and VAR stands for Variable Altitude or Roll. Basically, this was a base that the Who's could use to design many types of fighters, air superiority fighters, or cruiser escort fighters, bomber escort fighters, all with different qualities, different fuel capacities, different degrees of maneuverability, different armaments, different speeds, different service ceilings, all sorts of different things. This Hawk fighter was meant to engage in close combat with other fighters and to attack bombers. It's a lot larger than the standard Falcon fighter, but it's also, some of these are capable of holding a second pilot who can man a rear gun and can also coordinate missiles or bombs, similar things. This is a drawing of Abby, Myron's wife, who he met after Neverfall, at the village of Neverfall. It's a drawing of Orion at one point. This is a picture I tried to do of Megan from before. This is a Nefnari attack formation. So I've posted this online before. Basically, you've got the skitter stings all in here. They're pretty fast moving, and they will surge forward, and there's just masses of them. If you ever see a kind of black mass of ants on the ground, it's almost like that. And among these will drive Nefnari gun trucks, and they're pretty fast moving, light framed. I might have a picture of one in here somewhere. But they're a very light frame vehicle with a gunner in the back and a driver. And then behind all this, there will be snipers and regular infantry. But a lot of times these are just for support, and they don't usually see battle. Snipers are generally used to take out any, machine gun positions. They're taking out a lot of the skitter stings. The gun trucks are just for general infantry suppression, because if the infantry are busy shooting at the skitter stings, they're going to have more trouble shooting at the trucks. And if they choose to shoot at the trucks, they're going to be overwhelmed by skitter stings in pretty quick order. The Nefnari don't usually attack. They're usually more defensive, but this is the kind of counterattack that they'll use when the Who's attack their strongholds. Note that this kind of falls short when you've got, aircraft coming in that can just drop bombs and obliterate dozens of these things at once. Similarly, this is a Nefnari Fireska ground attack / carrier cruiser. It's a top-down view. Basically, this will fly relatively low, and it will just shoot down at the ground with missiles, guns, cannons, bombs, railguns, whatever it can. It's not particularly good against, it also will land troops from these side pods sort of areas. It's not a very good in ship-to-ship combat. It's moderately good against fighters, but this is Vel. He was a member of the Encarn military at Wobaron, and he was part of the squad that Peter and Emily were in during their first time fighting alongside them against Wobaron. Here's another picture of Alana. Kind of drawn like multiple pictures of some characters trying to get it right. Some of them I still haven't gotten right. This is a Scythe bomber. This is similar to the Scourge bomber that I showed you before, except this one's only 36 meters in diameter. It's a much lighter bomber, much less expensive, but it's also faster, more maneuverable, and less of a target. You can see there's a rear-facing gun there. And this thing will carry, all manner of smart bombs, or air torpedoes, or other kinds of ordnance. Sometimes these will actually carry the hull crawlers I showed you before to try to drop them. on ships. And this is the VAR Peregrine dive bomber. It's got a 16-meter wingspan. It's got seats for two. One's flies the thing, and one in the back has more to do with the rear gun and with coordinating bombs and whatnot. You'd think dive bombers aren't particularly effective in an era of guided missiles, and to some degree they aren't, but they do find their uses. So, that is all of the small index card drawings. I have to put them all away somehow. And then I will go to the clear box. And in about 15 seconds, the camera's going to finish its 29-minute advertised time, so we're going to see if it actually cuts off the video or not. I know it has more storage space. Okay, so the camera did kind of phase out there for a short second, but that's okay because it's just another short interruption. Need to get out the right box here. Okay, so this is the last box of drawings. Got all this to go through. So, let me see here. Where's a good place to start? Oh, here. So this is the L-270 gun truck used by the Nefnari. As I explained before, it's got a kind of frame back to it. It's got the machine gun up top. It's got the driver. It'll just roll up along the swarms of skitter stings to provide a good amount of cover fire for them to move up. This is a BM-443 APC. There's a kind of stick figure there drawn for scale. It's actually a little tall for the drawing, but anyway, this was used by the Enkarans against the Lyce in Wobaron, and it's armed with a automatic cannon of some fairly high caliber, and it holds about 10 to 12 soldiers. And some of them are also outfitted with missile launchers. This is a early Laos soldier. These were the very first Laos soldiers. Doesn't even have a gas mask yet. These were from about 1,000 years ago when the Lyce first rose. We'll give you a warning now. My battery is saying it's low. I'm gonna go for as long as I can, but I'll probably cut off the video pretty soon, just so I don't have it cut off randomly in the middle. This is a Laos Special Forces that's not a Daika. The Daika were not the only special forces the Lyce used. They also just had some other well-trained soldiers. Here is another drawing of Cassiopeia. It's a very early one. Not really quite what I was going for. But this is a Sentinel. This thing's about 6 feet tall, and it's used to guard the counselors, who are the leaders of the Lyce. And these are some very strange looking bioforms. And they carry, in each of their arms, they carry a little double-barreled rifle, submachine gun sort of thing. They use this little synthetic sensory device. You can't see the 3 black circles. Those are kind of camera eye type things, and what they allow is a good deal of depth perception due to triangulation. They can detect something's distance and velocity, and they can usually line up a pretty accurate shot. A gun that I'm not going to go over. Another drawing of Orion, much earlier on one. Alright, this is going to be the last drawing for this video, just because I don't want to have it cut off randomly when the battery runs out. So this is a HEG suit, or Heavy Exoskeleton Gunner Suit. This is an RAX chain gun that's usually mounted on tricopters, and this suit has some degree of exoskeletal musculature type thing that will help the shooter deal with the recoil of shooting a gun that's usually mounted on helicopters. It's also very well armored. This suit was designed and is fielded in relatively small numbers, but still significant numbers, by the WHOs of Serengarth, and some other places have models of these, that allows the WHO soldier to have firepower and strength comparable to that of a Hulk or a Breaker, but also a much smaller target. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. I know I said this was going to be the last video, but unfortunately, I guess I wasn't being truthful. I'll put these in the other box, so the orange box I still have to finish. So there's still all these drawings left to go through. There's a couple of canvas type, like stiff canvas board things I've been tracing on, and I'm going to ink and color, and there's a few drawing notebooks that I have, most of which aren't too full. Plan to go back to using them again someday. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will talk to you all soon. Goodbye.